Hi, I'm Steve Sellers with Revelation Comics, and today we're going to be talking about the creative origins of Roland Travis, aka Night Spider. Night Spider is a character who went through a couple of different iterations before we got the version that you saw in Blitz number 1. Um, Originally, the basic idea that I had, and this was like maybe 20 years ago, when I started actually developing ideas for a superhero universe, was the idea of what if a villain had a sidekick. And I think partly it was definitely inspired by Dick Grayson, Nightwing, who is one of my favorite characters. So, naturally kind of lent itself pretty obviously to that. And the result was a character called Midnight Blue. It didn't stick. I just couldn't get it to work at that time. I just didn't have the craft at that point. And some ideas you just kind of leave on the shelf until you're ready to write them and you know what to do with them. Night Spider ended up being one of those until much later. After a while, I got into fan fiction, and then towards the end of that, I was invited to a online RPG, play-by-post type of thing. And, I had to think of a character for it. I was still at the time kind of feeling like, okay, I'm better at creating interesting semi-villainous characters than I was at really creating heroes at that time. At least I felt that way. And so I kind of revisited the idea, except with the idea of him being a gentleman thief. I was really inspired at that time by Alfred Hitchcock, To Catch a Thief particularly, A.J. Raffles, The Amateur Cracksman, which I had read before that, various characters, in that vein. And then I kind of married it to the idea of the villainous sidekick, which didn't quite turn out the way that I had intended it back then. The Midnight Blue idea. And on top of that, I had also been at least a little bit, I think, influenced by Angel from Buffy, with the idea of a curse, forcing him to do good. And the reason I kind of came up with that is because I was trying to think of it, okay, what would be a convenient reason for him to reform if he's been this gentleman thief for however long? And so the idea kind of occurred to me, what if he stole the wrong thing, fell victim to a magic curse, and now he has to basically endure constant pain because of the theft of this gem. And so all of these different elements sort of came together to kind of form Night Spider. And I actually had the basic idea for the costume more or less around that time as well. I was experimenting with micro heroes, those kind of little graphics where you can just kind of mix and match little pieces and put them together. And so the black ninja suit was kind of based on that. The red color scheme is kind of based a little bit on that. It was a little bit more spidery than what you see in the issue, which I think is for the best, honestly. It's more lawyer friendly the way we have it now, so that's perfectly fine. But that's also more or less how the idea sort of coalesced. And then basically the idea was, as we were sort of playing the game, more of his dynamics with the other characters. Basically, how they were keeping him on the straight and narrow. The idea that the search for redemption being a little bit more difficult than he had planned. I had always had the idea of who his criminal family was at the beginning, but I didn't know necessarily who his parents were at that time specifically. I had certain ideas, but they hadn't coalesced during the game. That came later, and then for various reasons, which I won't go into, the game basically collapsed. It happens. Sometimes players just don't get along for whatever reason, or people are just don't have different priorities at a given time, and games just don't last like that. So Night Spider ended up being homeless at that point, and I had Amy at that time. She came after Night Spider, and so my thought was, okay, I have to create a new universe around these characters because I have stories I want to tell with them. I really loved Night Spider's dynamics with Amy, particularly at that time. I kind of felt like they were a good contrast. They kind of had that Kitty Pryde and Wolverine dynamic a little bit, or something like Spike and Dawn Summers from Buffy. You know, somewhere where you have like the older, experienced, darker character and the younger, more innocent, idealistic character, and I just kind of felt like that was a dynamic that clicked. And so this is why Night Spider I consider to be a co-lead of the book, even though this is about Blitz in the end. Yeah, airplanes like to fly over. So with that in mind, I created the Blitzverse around those two characters, and particularly with Roland, Night Spider, I knew that there were things that I wanted to say, with the surrounding characters around him. So a lot of these other things ended up becoming coalescing. I knew the organization, for example, that had kept the gem, and I have other, details surrounding that. I figure out who his father was. You're going to find that out in a while from now. It's not one of those things I want to leap immediately into, but we're going to see bits and pieces of Roland's father as we move towards that arc, where I finally unveil him. You do see a little bit in Blitz #1, so that shadowy figure, that's who he is. And so, because I had at one point, written an entire kind of like saga in my head about what their dynamic was, why Roland left the family, how how his father would basically take it, and then ultimately this battle that would ultimately be inevitable, because at this point they're at cross purposes and they don't really care for each other. They didn't even really like each other that much before, but it's worse now. Or at least it will be worse once they meet again. So all of those things came together. But I really wanted to get to the idea of Roland Travis being a outwardly fun character, with the idea that deep down he has this element of darkness that always follows him and that he can't escape. And I also wanted to deal with the fact that we don't often see the consequences of the villainous lifestyle in the way that we would like. Because you get situations like, say, with the X-Men, where you have a villain that becomes a hero, and then suddenly everything is forgiven. I didn't want that for Roland Travis. I wanted him to have his past constantly follow him. I wanted him to constantly deal with people who trust he had broken, and bad people that he had trained, and girls who heart he had broken and betrayed, and things like that. So that when he makes the face turn, he has to deal with the consequences of this. He's got cops that hate him and heroes that hate him, and all these things where he has to kind of hide his identity from them, because if they know, bad things happen. And so eventually, I just enjoy with Night Spider the most, confronting him with the sins of his past, because I feel like somebody with a past like that, who had been a criminal for most of his life, is not somebody who is going to get out of that very easily, no matter how much he tries. And that's his conflict, and that's why it's so much fun writing this character. So yeah, that's we'll see where he goes from here. Blitz #2 will hopefully be in around 2023, so we will see what comes up next for him. And thank you for listening. Drop a like, hit the button, magic bell for notifications, and if you want more content, please support us on Omen Comics Patreon or anything else. And until next time, this is Steve with Revelation Comics signing off.